In the thick mist of Ravenbrook, where damp cobblestone streets and whispering pine forests carried the weight of old tales, a shy boy and his German shepherd stepped into a journey no one could have foreseen. Zoe, sharp-eyed and warm-breathed, became the bridge between Lucas and a mysterious girl held captive in the dark. Each paw print brought them closer to a secret buried for years. Then came a growl, a door creaked open, and the fire began to spread. In the moment Zoe leapt into the flames, what was it that changed Lucas's heart forever? Early mornings in Ravenbrook always began shrouded in a thin veil of mist. The small town nestled quietly among pine-covered hills, almost invisible to anyone passing by on a map. Damp cobblestone streets and aged wooden rooftops blended into the gray of the overcast sky, forming a scene both serene and slightly somber, as if the town's past still held stories yet untold. Whenever the drizzle visited, Ravenbrook became even more ethereal. Tiny droplets clung to the leaves, sparkling like thousands of shards of glass. The steady patter of rain on wooden eaves, mingled with the distant calls of forest birds, created a calm, rhythmic symphony. The townspeople lived slowly, rarely straying from their familiar paths. They believed Ravenbrook was safe secluded, and that what belonged to the forest should remain with the forest. In a small wooden house on the town's edge, 13-year-old Lucas sat by the window. His tousled brown hair framed a lean frame, and his eyes held a mix of curiosity and timidity. Lucas had never been the bravest in class. Crowds made him fidget, and his cheeks flushed easily when called upon. Yet beneath his shy demeanor lay a gentle heart full of compassion, always wanting to protect any fragile life he encountered. Beside Lucas, a solid, warm presence stretched across the wooden floor. Zoe, a German shepherd with a glossy amber and black coat ears pricked like tiny antennas and sharp amber eyes that could catch the slightest movement, even in dim light. To Lucas, Zoe was more than a dog. She was a loyal friend, a silent guardian, and a refuge when the world felt too vast. This morning, Zoe lifted her head abruptly, ears twitching, as if catching a distant sound. Lucas tilted his own head, straining to listen, but all he heard was the rain. "Just a squirrel," he whispered, patting her gently. Yet Zoe remained alert, gaze fixed on the misty forest beyond. The Ravenbrook woods surrounding the town, like a massive green wall, had long inspired whispered tales. Elders spoke of an abandoned house once belonging to a family who left without a trace. Some swore they saw flickering lights in the night, though the house was supposedly empty. Children would scare each other with tales of echoing footsteps and shadowy figures glimpsed through broken windows. Lucas had heard these stories countless times, each retelling sending shivers down his spine, mixed with curiosity. He knew he was timid, yet sometimes his curiosity surged so strongly that he could not ignore it. And as always, Zoe stood beside him, a loyal shadow ready to follow him through dark alleys or the dense forest paths. That morning, while the mist still clung to the town, Lucas found his thoughts drifting to the abandoned house. He looked at Zoe, a small smile forming. Maybe one day, we'll see for ourselves if the rumors are true. Zoe offered no reply, only tilting her head and letting out a low, almost knowing whine, as if understanding he had just hinted at danger. Lucas laughed softly, tugging his sweater tighter around him. Outside the Ravenbrook woods stood silent, but in Zoe's eyes, something flickered. A sharp vigilance Lucas had yet to notice, and somewhere in the thick mist, it seemed another pair of eyes watched, waiting for the day the boy and his dog would set foot in the abandoned house, where the rumors were only the beginning of a far greater secret. That afternoon the rain had stopped, yet the mist lingered. The dirt path leading to the forest's edge was streaked with puddles, the air carrying the damp, earthy scent of grass. Lucas donned a light jacket and walked slowly beside Zoe. Their routine walks after school had become essential, a chance to escape noise and find calm, accompanied only by the rustle of leaves and Zoe's warm presence. Zoe moved to his left tail, swaying gently, nose lifting constantly to catch invisible scents. Lucas was accustomed to her alertness, but today her gaze and stance felt different. Every few steps she paused, ears pricked, body taut as a drawn bowstring. "What is it?" "Zoe," Lucas asked softly, half curious, half cautious. He looked around, seeing only wet, mist-covered tree trunks and dripping branches. No one else. No sound but the whispering forest. Yet in that moment, Lucas felt something strange, as if the forest itself were watching him. The sensation crept into his bones, sending goosebumps along his arms. He drew his hands into his pockets and stepped closer to Zoe. She glanced at him briefly, then turned her head, letting out a low growl from deep in her throat. Small as it was, the sound made the air feel heavier. Suddenly, from deep within the mist, came a faint noise, the clatter of metal like a gate swinging in the wind. Zoe leapt forward immediately, growling more sharply. Lucas jumped, heart-racing, eyes straining toward the sound. But the dense fog only revealed vague, overlapping gray shapes. "Is someone there?" he asked, voice trembling. His question vanished into the forest with no answer. Zoe tugged on the leash nose, pressed to the ground, urging Lucas forward. Hesitant, he followed, trusting that Zoe would never lead him into danger without reason. A few dozen meters further, through thick underbrush, an open clearing appeared. In its center, an old pickup truck sat alone on the muddy ground, paint-peeling wheels caked in dirt, seemingly abandoned for years. The right door hung ajar, hinges creaking in the wind. The very sound Lucas had heard. He froze, eyes wide. He had heard stories of strangers' vehicles appearing at the forest's edge, but no one knew the truth. Now it stood before him, imposing and mysterious. Zoe didn't approach immediately, circling the truck body, tense amber eyes gleaming through the mist. Low growls rumbled from her throat, both a warning and a call for Lucas to proceed cautiously. Lucas swallowed hard, taking slow, careful steps, heart pounding. The truck doors shuddered in the breeze, revealing a shadowy depth inside. He felt as if something waited within, neither a trap nor a sanctuary, yet neither entirely safe. A cold gust carried the scent of rust and damp fabric. Zoe let out a quiet whine, leaning toward the truck. Lucas hesitated, half wanting to flee home, half compelled to step closer and see what lay within. In that moment, he understood one thing. Curiosity had opened a door, and Zoe was the thread connecting him to the secret hidden behind Ravenbrook's mist. Lucas turned to Zoe and whispered, "Tomorrow, we'll come back." Zoe looked at him, her eyes glinting with a sharp seriousness, then lightly nudged Lucas's hand with her nose. A silent promise. From afar, the caw of a crow echoed through the thick fog. Lucas shivered. He pulled Zoe away from the clearing, but knew deep down that from today, the peace of Ravenbrook had begun to fracture. The sun began to set behind the Ravenbrook hills, the last light piercing the dense fog, turning the entire forest into a blurred, wet painting of muted golds and oranges. Along the winding dirt path, Lucas led Zoe closer to the empty clearing, where a rusted truck lay abandoned, silent, like a fallen giant long ago. The truck's paint had faded, the green peeling in patches to reveal mottled rust. The side windows were shattered shards, catching the evening light like cold, unblinking eyes. The right door was ajar, the wind whispering through it with a creaking, chilling groan. Zoe stopped in front of the truck, ears erect, body tense. A low growl rose in her throat, part warning, part urging. Lucas swallowed hard, gripping the leash tightly, legs trembling. He knew there was something inside the truck, something his young heart both wanted to flee from and was compelled to confront. Lucas stepped forward. The mud squelched under his shoes, breaking the silence. Zoe lunged, barking sharply. The sound ricocheted into the darkness within. Lucas held his breath and peered inside. At first it was just a patch of impenetrable shadow, but gradually his eyes made out a small, curled-up figure in the back. A little girl. Her hair was matted, streaked with dust and sweat. Her hands were bound with coarse rope across her knees. Her eyes, wide and bright in the sunset, were frozen in panic and immobility like a tiny bird trapped in a cage. Lucas felt dizzy. He couldn't believe someone had been imprisoned in an abandoned truck in the middle of Ravenbrook forest. His heart thumped wildly, cold sweat soaking his palms. Zoe stepped forward immediately, standing guard in front of the truck, her amber eyes piercing the darkness as if ready to confront anything that might leap out. Lucas sank to his knees, voice trembling. You're going to be okay. I'll get you out. Don't be afraid." His hand shook as he touched the door. It groaned with a long metallic squeal as he pushed it open. The smell of rust, decayed fabric, and stale human scent hit his face. Zoe stepped ahead, blocking the path, eyes locked on the darkness as if daring any threat to emerge. The girl remained silent. Only her eyes, both terrified and pleading, followed Lucas. He inhaled deeply and stepped inside, knees trembling, and began to undo the ropes binding her small wrists. The rope was rough and tight, biting into her skin. Lucas's fingers fumbled, slipping several times. Zoe growled softly beside him, a warning that time was short. Outside, the wind carried the faint clatter of metal like someone, or something, was moving in the forest. Finally, after several attempts, the knot gave way. The little hands dropped, marked with red impressions. Lucas exhaled sharply, looking at her. "You're free. Let's go." Yet the girl didn't speak. Lips trembling as if she wanted to, but couldn't. Only her eyes, still shaking, still filled with fear, spoke the silent terror lingering within. Zoe moved closer, lowering her head with a soft whine. Strangely, the girl blinked, her gaze softening slightly as her trembling hand touched Zoe's back. In that instant, Zoe froze, radiating steadfast strength. A silent reassurance seeped into the tense air. Lucas summoned his courage, taking her hand and guiding her out of the truck. The last rays of the sun fell directly on her, making her eyes flicker with a faint, fragile light. She collapsed onto the dirt, gasping, still speechless. Lucas sat beside her, looking first at Zoe, then at the girl. "I'll call you." "Mira, all right?" Like a little light in the sunset. The girl didn't respond, but her eyes shimmered faintly, a subtle acceptance of the name. Zoe sat directly in front of them, eyes scanning the forest, ever vigilant. The old truck now seemed quieter than ever. But for Lucas, it was the moment his heart had touched a new mystery. A secret hidden in Ravenbrook's twilight, terrifying yet irresistible. The path back to Ravenbrook was shrouded in heavier mist than usual. Darkness crept in branches reaching from the fog in twisted shapes that made Lucas shiver. He gripped Zoe's leash tightly, one hand supporting Mira, who clung to Zoe, hands gripping the thick fur as if it were her only anchor to safety. Zoe moved slowly, always positioned between Lucas and Mira, like an invisible wall. Occasionally she paused, ears erect, eyes scanning the dark forest. Lucas followed her gaze, seeing nothing but shadows. Still, his chest tightened, a feeling that something was watching them, lurking just beyond the mist. "You're safe now. It's okay," Lucas whispered, voice trembling but attempting firmness. He wanted to reassure Mira, but his words didn't seem to reach her. She stayed silent, head bowed, clinging to Zoe as though letting go would mean being swallowed by the darkness. When they arrived home, Lucas guided Mira to a wooden chair in the kitchen. Warm yellow light fell across her pale face. Dry lips, tangled hair, and eyes reflecting an unfathomable depth of fear. Zoe sat beneath her, nudging her hand softly while Mira shivered, holding on without letting go. Lucas awkwardly handed her a cup of water. "Drink. You must be thirsty, right?" She didn't respond, eyes never leaving Zoe. Lucas set the cup down, feeling helpless. He wanted to ask what had happened, who had locked her in that truck, but her silence was a stone wall. Night fell, the house sinking into quiet. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, creating eerie sounds. Lucas lay in his room, Zoe curled at the foot of his bed, Mira in the living room under a thin blanket. Yet Lucas could not sleep. He tossed and turned, eyes wide in the dark. Every time he closed them, Mira's eyes appeared, wide, clear, and panicked, like a tiny bird cornered in a cage. They haunted him, echoing in his mind with the sounds of frantic breathing, the scrape of rope against skin, the metallic shriek of a closing door. Lucas jumped up and stepped into the hallway. He glanced down at the living room. The dim light from the night lamp fell across Mira, who sat curled beneath a blanket. Yet her hand remained pressed on Zoe's back as if afraid to lose her anchor. Zoe wasn't in a deep sleep either. Her ears twitched and her amber eyes glimmered in the shadows, alert to every sound. Lucas leaned against the doorframe, watching them both. Part of him wanted to rush forward to wrap Mira in his arms and promise that he would protect her. But another part held him back, knowing he was only a 13-year-old boy. Would that promise even stand against the darkness closing in? The clock ticked steadily, stretching the moments into a tense rhythm. Lucas whispered under his breath, speaking to himself. "Mira, who could have done this to you?" The question hung in the air, met only by the wind rustling through the forest. And in Mira's shimmering eyes, Lucas glimpsed something more. Beyond fear, a secret yet to be revealed. That night, Lucas understood one thing with certainty. Ever since meeting Mira, the peaceful life he knew in Ravenbrook would never be the same again. The next morning, as the fog still clung thick over the gray-tiled roofs of Ravenbrook, Zoe stood at the doorstep, ears perked, nose constantly brushing the damp ground. Lucas had just stepped outside while Mira sat silently on the porch steps, the thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Zoe let out a soft whine, then tugged sharply on her leash, as if urging them forward. Lucas crouched down to inspect the ground. Deep tire tracks were imprinted in the wet dirt, muddy streaks, trailing off with vapor rising in the cool morning. He touched the soil. It was still soft, proving the tracks were fresh, likely from last night. Zoe's found something. Lucas whispered, a mix of worry and curiosity swirling in his chest. Mira's eyes immediately widened. She clutched the blanket tighter, yet when Zoe pulled Lucas forward, she rose silently, following along, as if staying behind alone would let the darkness swallow her whole. 3 figures, a boy, a quiet girl, and a German shepherd, threaded their way along the narrow path leading deeper into the forest. Wet leaves brushed together, heavy dew dripped from high branches, mingling with Lucas's quickened breathing. Zoe led the way, nimble and precise, her nose never leaving the long tire tracks imprinted in the soil. They walked on farther and farther from the familiar trail. Trees grew thicker, sunlight barely piercing the canopy. The air was dense with the damp smell of earth and decaying wood. Lucas shivered, a creeping sensation that invisible eyes were watching them from deep within the woods. After what felt like an eternity, Zoe abruptly stopped in a clearing where the tracks led straight to an old structure. A wooden warehouse, its walls weathered, roof tiles sagging, and the front door drooping to reveal a dark crack. Piles of wood stacked around the building were coated in dust and cobwebs. Broken windows allowed the wind to whistle through, producing a chilling sound. Lucas's breath caught. He had heard the townspeople speak of abandoned forest houses, once used to store wood and coal, years ago long since deserted. And now, one of them stood right before his eyes. Mira recoiled, eyes wide with fright. Her hands gripped Zoe's back as if only the dog could keep her safe. Zoe paused, amber eyes blazing, body slightly lowered in a stance of readiness. Lucas inhaled deeply. The musty scent filled his lungs, heavy and stifling. He pressed a hand against the rotting wooden door. When he nudged it, the hinge screamed in a piercing, prolonged shriek. The door creaked open, and a dense darkness spilled out, carrying the scent of old wood dust and a strange, acrid odor, like someone had recently stepped inside. Inside moss-covered wood lay haphazardly dust floating in the weak beams of light seeping through gaps in the roof. The ceiling sagged, vines clinging to the beams, and small droplets fell from the leaky roof landing tap. Tap on the rotten wooden floor. Lucas trembled as he stepped in, heart racing. Mira stood behind him, silent, clutching Zoe, eyes wide and frantic as they darted around the space. Zoe moved forward, every movement taut with alertness. In that instant, Lucas felt it clearly. This old warehouse wasn't simply abandoned. A cold presence filled the air, as if the shadows had witnessed events Ravenbrook itself wished to forget. The morning in Ravenbrook usually began wrapped in thick fog, like a scarf around the town. But today, when Lucas stepped outside, Zoe was already at the porch. Nose to the wet earth, ears pricked as if she had picked up a strange signal. Curious, Lucas stepped closer. On the dirt road leading into the forest, deep tire tracks stretched through the mud, shimmering with lingering water in the dim light. He touched the soft soil which clung to his fingers. The tracks were fresh. A chill ran down his spine. Someone had passed here right after they found Mira. "Zoe wants me to follow," Lucas whispered, both anxious and excited. Mira remained on the porch, thin blanket around her shoulders. Hearing him, her eyes widened with fear, but she forced herself to stand. Silent, she chose to come along instantly, gripping Zoe as if seeking safety. The three small figures, a boy, a quiet girl, and a German shepherd, ventured into the forest. Zoe led nose to the ground, body taut with vigilance. Every step, the wet leaves and brushing branches created soft sounds like whispers from the forest. They moved deeper where sunlight barely reached. The mist thickened, winding around tall trees, deepening the shadows. Lucas glanced back repeatedly, sensing invisible eyes following his back. Mira remained silent and never leaving Zoe's thick fur, occasionally shivering at strange noises. Finally, the tracks led them to a clearing. There, an old structure emerged, a wooden warehouse. The house looked long abandoned. Roof tiles sagged, patches of moss streaked the surfaces. The dark wooden front door hinge, rusted, gaped a narrow black slit. Piles of wood stacked around, covered in dust and cobwebs, as if the place had been buried in the memories of a lost time. Lucas inhaled sharply. The musty odor was thick and suffocating. Wind whistled through broken windows, creating long, eerie wails like someone weeping in the shadows. He swallowed hard. "Maybe someone's been here recently," he murmured, eyes fixed on the tire tracks etched right at the doorway. Mira immediately clutched Zoe tighter, eyes wide with horror. Zoe stepped forward, body leaning, ears pricked, straight amber eyes shining through the mist. The dog sniffed sharply, let out a low growl, and looked back at Lucas, signaling him to proceed. Lucas trembled as he stepped forward. His hand brushed against the rotting wooden latch. When he pushed lightly, the door groaned with a long, piercing screech that echoed through the silent forest, making Mira jump in fright. Inside, darkness swallowed everything. Only a few thin slivers of light filtered through broken roof tiles, casting a pale glow on drifting dust motes. Piles of decayed wood lay scattered, covered in green moss. The air was thick with the scent of dampness, old timber, and a strange human-like odor, unsettling and foreign. Lucas stepped in, his heart hammering. Each creak of the rotten floorboards beneath his feet sent shivers down his spine. Mira lingered at the doorway, hesitant, her eyes locked on Zoe, until finally she stepped inside. Zoe moved ahead, her body solid, each motion deliberate and taut with vigilance. The sound of her breathing merged with Lucas's thudding heartbeat in the darkness. In that instant, all three felt it clearly. This warehouse was not merely abandoned. The dense shadows within concealed something, and that secret was waiting to be uncovered, or to consume anyone bold enough to touch it. Inside the damp warehouse, dim light filtered through the gaps in the wooden roof. Dust swirled in the air, tiny particles glittering like ash, as they slowly drifted to the cracked floorboards. Zoe stood guard ears pricked, amber eyes blazing in the gloom. Lucas held Mira close, his heart still racing from the door's eerie screech. As his eyes adjusted, Lucas noticed something unusual pinned to the wall. A large sheet of paper, edges frayed and torn, fastened with rusty nails. He stepped closer, brushing off layers of dust to reveal the image beneath. Lucas held his breath. It was a map of Ravenbrook. Main streets, the marketplace, the school, even the forest paths, all drawn in meticulous detail. What made his skin crawl were the red markings scattered across the map, encircling familiar locations. Some were bold and thick, as if marking spots of particular significance. What does this mean? Lucas whispered, a chill running down his spine. Beneath the map, old wooden boxes were stacked haphazardly. Lucas carefully opened one. The rusted hinges creaked loudly. Inside, instead of the wood or coal he expected, there were thick files of yellowed paper, their musty scent rising. Among them were strange items, old notebooks, tape rope, and even a few scattered keys. Zoe sniffed closer, letting out a low growl, confirming the place had once been occupied. Mira's gaze fixed on the map. Her small body trembled, hands clutching Zoe's fur until it turned pale. Lucas noticed the change immediately. "Mira, do you recognize something?" he asked quietly, his voice thick with concern. Mira didn't answer. Her wide eyes were filled with panic as she shakily pointed to a red mark on the outskirts of town where the deep forest met the main road. Her expression twisted as if some horrifying memory had surged to the surface. Lucas felt his chest tighten. He wanted to ask more, to know what Mira had witnessed, but he feared that even a single question could shatter her. Instead, he looked to Zoe. The dog's calm gaze reminded him that the truth could be painful, but it must be faced eventually. A breeze slipped through the cracks, making the map tremble. The red circles shimmered faintly in the dim light, like bleeding wounds across Ravenbrook. Lucas shivered, realizing he and Mira had stumbled onto a secret someone had risked everything to hide. Outside, a broken branch snapped a harsh crack that echoed. Zoe immediately growled, bristling, standing between the children and the door. Lucas yanked Mira back, his heart leaping into his throat. In that moment, Lucas knew they hadn't merely found an abandoned warehouse. They had opened the door to a conspiracy spanning the town. And somehow Mira already knew part of the truth. The damp air of the warehouse, heavy to begin with, now felt suffocating. The map swayed slightly, its red rings pulsing like fresh wounds in the faint light. Lucas stepped back, heart hammering, while Mira clung to Zoe, hands trembling as if the dog's fur were the only thing keeping her upright. Then, without warning, a loud bang echoed. Dust rained down from the roof. The door behind them, previously ajar, slammed shut with a violent jolt, shaking the decrepit room. Darkness surged, leaving only faint streaks of light from a high crack. Lucas gasped. Mira nearly collapsed, saved only by Zoe's protective stance. The dog growled low, every muscle taut, amber eyes piercing the shadows. The warehouse fell into oppressive silence. Lucas could hear the hammering of his own heart. Then, from the back of the room, a sound emerged. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. As if meant to be heard, Lucas held his breath. A scent crept into the air. Sharp, pungent smoke. In a forest, inside an abandoned warehouse, it was a signal someone was here. "There's someone," Lucas stammered, eyes wide, sweat beading his forehead. Zoe growled a deep, resonant rumble that made Mira flinch, yet also served as her shield. The dog stepped forward, claws clicking against the wood. The footsteps halted. Then from the shadows at the far end, a hoarse voice cut through. "Who dares enter here?" Lucas clenched his hands, swallowing hard. In the dim light, a figure slowly emerged. Tall, clad in a dark, long coat, hair falling across his forehead. The red glow from a cigarette flickered, illuminating his cold eyes and twisted smile. The warehouse transformed into a trap. Mira shook, face pale, eyes wide with terror. Lucas understood instantly this man. Mira had seen him before or had endured something tied to him. He stepped forward, each footfall creaking on the rotten boards. His voice rasped thick with smoke. "Curiosity is dangerous, kid." Lucas retreated only to find Mira pressed behind him. Zoe bristled, lowering her body, ready to strike. Amber eyes met the man's icy gaze in a tense, suffocating standoff. Each second stretched endlessly. Lucas could hear Mira's breathing, fast, ragged, broken, as if she were about to faint. In his mind, a whirlwind of thoughts raced: how to escape, how to call for help, and whether Zoe could stand up to such a dangerous adult. The man drew a slow breath of smoke, the red tip illuminating his gaunt face, and exhaled a thick cloud. His voice calm and steady. "I hate kids, but I hate even more curious dogs." The words barely left his mouth when Zoe let out a deep, resonant growl that reverberated through the warehouse. Lucas felt a surge of courage from that sound. This was the first climax. Darkness, cigarette smoke, footsteps, and the appearance of the stranger had transformed the warehouse into a dangerous chessboard. The door had slammed shut. Escape was impossible. Lucas realized that, from this moment on, Mira and Zoe were fully entangled in Ravenbrook's dark secret. The damp warehouse seemed to hold its breath. Dim light from a crack in the roof flickered across the dusty air, illuminating swirling particles. Lucas stepped back. Mira pressed tremblingly behind him, and Zoe stood in a defensive stance, her body solid and unyielding like a shield. The shadows revealed the stranger more clearly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat reaching down to his knees, the hem stained with mud. In one hand he held a half-smoked cigarette. Now a long flashlight appeared in the other, its cold beam slicing across the thick darkness of the warehouse. Every sweep of light made Lucas and Mira flinch, as if they were exposed under his icy gaze. Zoe growled again, amber eyes blazing. As the man lifted the flashlight directly toward Lucas, Zoe lunged. The sound of claws scraping the decaying wooden floor echoed violently. Her attack was decisive, powerful, like a living arrow shot straight into danger. But the man seemed to expect it. He sidestepped with impossible speed for his large frame. From his coat pocket a spark flashed. A harsh click echoed, followed by a chilling sound, zzz, the crackle of a taser. Zoe hit empty space and was instantly struck by a powerful electric jolt. Her growl turned into a strangled cry. Her strong frame, shuttered legs, buckled fur bristled under the current. Zoe, Lucas shouted, voice breaking with despair. Mira sobbed silently, clutching Lucas's back. Her wide eyes overflowed with terror, as if the scene before her had dredged up buried traumas. Zoe struggled to stand, body trembling, but her amber eyes remained fixed on the man, unyielding. The stranger merely smirked, hoarse voice echoing in the wooden room. "Clever dog, but foolish to think it can fight me." Fear gripped Lucas's throat. He stepped back, arms outstretched, shielding Mira. Her small hands clung desperately to his shirt, almost tearing the fabric. The flashlight swept across again, now fixed on Lucas's face. He squinted, tears streaming from the harsh glare. The man stepped closer. Each thud of his boots on the wooden floor sounded like a hammer to Lucas's chest. "Curious little kids," he said slowly. smoke and acrid breath filling the air. You're stepping where you shouldn't. Lucas swallowed hard, forcing himself calm. But he could feel Mira trembling behind him, her tiny hands gripping him like a lifeline. "Stay back!" Lucas shouted, voice cracking but trying to sound strong. We'll scream. The whole town will hear." The man chuckled coldly. "You think a scream in this forest will carry that far?" His words cut through Lucas's fragile resolve like a knife. Darkness seemed to thicken around the three of them, threatening to swallow all hope. Zoe, despite the taser's pain, took small steps forward, growling as if swearing never to retreat. Seeing that Lucas clenched his fists, Zoe was enduring pain to protect him and Mira, and that alone gave him no choice but to stand. I won't let you touch Mira," Lucas shouted, voice trembling yet firmer than ever. The man paused, eyes cold on Lucas, then glanced at Mira, trembling behind him. His lips curled into a half-smile, chilling. "This little girl. Seems you've seen too much." Mira gasped. Eyes wide, tears streaming uncontrollably. She wanted to scream, to speak, but her throat felt constricted, strangled. The warehouse felt like a closed arena. The taser crackled rhythmically. The flashlight swept across, exposing fear in every shadow. Lucas and Mira were pressed against the cold wooden wall, while Zoe, though shivering, stood firm, a warrior, exhausted but unbowed. Ravenbrook seemed to hold its breath. Only pounding hearts, the whistle of wind through cracks, and tension thick enough to choke remained. Then, in the moment when all hope seemed lost, Mira, the quiet girl eyes haunted by fear, broke the silence. A scream erupted sharp and raw with pain. It echoed through the decrepit warehouse, bouncing off the wooden walls, shattering the heavy air. It was not just a call for help. It was the explosion of long-suppressed memories, the release of fear held too long. The man froze, body stiff for a moment. His cold confidence wavered slightly at the sudden, echoing scream. The flashlight in his hand wavered, casting chaotic beams across the walls like a mad fire. Zoe, fueled by the sound, suddenly shook off the taser's weight. With a full-body thrust, she lunged at the man, amber eyes blazing. The collision sent him staggering, the taser slipping from his hand to the floor with a sharp clatter. Electricity died instantly, returning the room to damp darkness. Lucas gasped, astonished and relieved Zoe. The man struggled to regain balance. The flashlight flew from his hand, bouncing across the floor, light flickering like it might die. A final thud sounded as the flashlight hit the ground, sparking a tiny electrical flash. Unfortunately, the warehouse had grown far too old. A tattered canvas draped across the wall had soaked up oil from the wooden barrels, holding discarded materials. That tiny spark caught the fabric, and in an instant a flicker ignited, flickering once before bursting into a fierce blaze. The flames crawled rapidly along the wooden walls, devouring dusty cobwebs and rotting scraps of cloth. In moments, the warehouse, once smelling merely of damp and mold, became thick with acrid smoke, stinging and choking anyone inside. Lucas panicked, clutching Mira tightly. "We have to get out of here." The smoke rolled in heavy, suffocating waves, thickening the air. Zoe clung to the man, growling with warning, forcing him back against the wall. But the fire advanced the flickering light and shadows, twisting the space into a living nightmare. The man struggled, shouting in rage. "Get off, you damn dog!" He swung wildly, trying to push Zoe away. But the German shepherd transformed into a steadfast warrior, sinking her teeth into the edge of his long coat and yanking him to the ground. Flames licked at his clothing, igniting a scorched patch that sent him into a panic as he tore the coat aside. Lucas coughed violently, eyes stinging from smoke. He pulled Mira closer to his chest, whispering through trembling breaths. "Don't be afraid. I'll get you out." Mira's eyes brimmed with tears, but unlike before, she now clung to Lucas, her lips trembling as they managed the first hesitant sounds. "Help me." Two fragile words, yet enough to tighten Lucas's chest. Mira had spoken, the trembling voice breaking through the long silence, opening a doorway from the shadows that had held her captive. Zoe's eyes flashed in the smoky haze, understanding the urgency. She moved backward toward Lucas and Mira, positioning herself between them and the man growling a clear warning. The fire now raged fiercely, consuming half of the wooden wall. Smoke thickened until all surroundings blurred into shapes. Pops and cracks echoed as burning wood split and shattered. Lucas knew time had run out. He pulled Mira along, shouting through the choking smoke, "Zoe, come with us." The man staggered to his feet, face twisted in fury and pain. He reached out to grab them, but Zoe lunged with all the strength she had left. In the chaos amid screams, growls, and crackling flames, Ravenbrook seemed to shake. The fire devoured the warehouse like a beast awakened from a long slumber. Wood creaked and snapped. The roof shuddered violently, embers and glowing ashes raining down around the trio. The thick smoke clawed at their throats, each breath slicing like a knife. Lucas pressed Mira tightly to his chest, dragging her forward, eyes burning from the smoke. Mira no longer screamed, burying her face in his chest, tears mixing with sweat as her small body shuddered. Her frail hands clutched his jacket as if it were the only tether to life. Ahead, Zoe let out a powerful growl, then leapt into the dancing shadows of fire. The dog moved through burning planks as if smoke and flame posed no threat. Her amber eyes shone in the firelight, ears alert. Zoe was the only beacon through the thick haze. Lucas stumbled each step, heavy as if shackled. Heat blasted his face, dizziness threatening to overtake him. Yet Zoe's encouraging growls drew him forward. A large beam fell just beside him, igniting into a blaze that made Lucas flinch and stumble. Mira cried out, nearly pulled down with him. Zoe whirled, barking, clawing at the ground, urging them onward. Gritting his teeth, Lucas forced himself upright, dragging Mira past the burning plank. Smoke surged in waves, obscuring every exit. Lucas coughed violently, eyes stinging sweat and ash streaming down his face. But he kept his focus on Zoe's figure ahead. The solid back of the shepherd slicing a path through smoke and fire. "Come on, Mira. Don't let go." Lucas rasped, breath breaking. She gave a weak nod, body limp and quivering. Zoe growled again now, accompanied by a cold draft sneaking through a crack, a signal that the exit lay close. Zoe lunged, clawing at the wooden door ahead. It was jammed by a rotted bar, but she didn't hesitate, ramming it with her body. The crash echoed, and sunlight spilled inside like a miracle. Lucas nearly wept as he glimpsed Ravenbrook's gray sky beyond the doorway. He threw himself into running, dragging Mira while Zoe barked and led the way. The three tumbled onto the wet forest floor outside. Cold, fresh air hit their faces, a stark relief from the stifling heat within. Lucas coughed up blood, gasping lungs, finally freed. Mira lay huddled, breathing hard, eyes wide with panic, yet glinting with the faintest spark of survival. Zoe stood guard, fur singed and smoke-stained, mouth open, panting yet eyes sharp and vigilant. Her tail wagged faintly, a quiet affirmation. They were safe, for now. Lucas forced himself upright, covering Mira with his arms. He glanced back. The warehouse was now a towering inferno. Flames licked the roof, black smoke spiraled into Ravenbrook's sky, the crashing wood echoing like the roar of a dying beast. Then he remembered. The man. Lucas scanned for him among the fire and shadows. Only broken walls and blazing wood remained. The man was nowhere to be seen. A chill ran down Lucas's spine. The fire may have claimed him, or he may have escaped through another path. His disappearance left a lingering unease, a warning that danger was far from over. Mira huddled, trembling. Lucas draped his wet jacket over her shoulders, then turned to hug Zoe. The dog shivered with each breath, yet her amber gaze locked on him, fiery and resolute, as if to say, "We made it, but prepare yourself. The fight isn't over." Lucas drew a deep, steadying breath, swallowing his tears, eyes lingering on the blazing warehouse. Amid the gloomy forest, the scene etched itself into memory, an indelible scar in the lives of the 3 survivors. Rain began falling over Ravenbrook, silent drops, cascading from the gray sky onto the smoldering ruins, mingling with the lingering smoke draping the town in a damp, somber veil. Lucas helped Mira along the slippery cobblestone path. His jacket clung wet to his back, but he kept her close, preserving whatever warmth he could. Zoe trotted beside them, smoke-scented and singed in patches, yet still poised, ears pricked like alert antennas, ever watchful. Inside Lucas's mind, one thought kept spinning. He had to contact the police immediately. The fire, the strange man, the rusted truck, and the red marks on the map. All of it was far too serious for a child to keep to himself. He turned to Mira, trying to keep his voice gentle. "We should go to the police. They'll help." But the moment she heard the words, "police," Mira flinched, her whole body stiffening. Her eyes widened in sheer panic. She shook her head frantically, raindrops and tears flying, her voice choked. "No, don't. The police." Lucas froze. He had never seen anyone terrified of just a name like that. Mira curled up, clutching Zoe as if the dog were the only safe refuge. Zoe stood silently, bearing the tight embrace of the little girl, eyes fixed on Lucas, silently saying, "Don't push." She wasn't ready. He bit his lip, swallowing the words he had just spoken. His mind twisted in knots. If he didn't tell the police, who could he turn to? The rain pounded harder, drumming against the streets with a relentless patter. Lucas lowered his head and walked on, his heart heavy. He thought of his parents. But if they knew, they would surely lock him at home and never allow him near Mira or Zoe again. They might not even believe him. Ravenbrook was a small town. People trusted hearsay more than terrifying truths. Lost in thought, Lucas suddenly felt something bulky in his jacket pocket. He reached in, surprised, to pull out a scorched, half-burned piece of paper, edges blackened and damp from the rain. He was certain he hadn't put it there. Lucas unfolded it. Among the burn marks, a few strange symbols remained clear, intersecting lines connecting small circles like a military-style map. In the corner, a shaky, scrawled line of words was still legible. "Trust no one. They are watching." A chill ran down Lucas's spine. He scanned the empty street, rain blurring his vision, but an unsettling feeling of being watched surged. "Mira, look at this." Lucas held out the paper. Mira only glanced briefly, trembling eyes flaring with panic. She clutched Zoe tighter, whispering just enough for herself. They found us." Lucas didn't fully understand, but Mira's words hit him like sharp knives. There was a they, someone behind the red marks on the map, now aware of them. Thunder rumbled in the distance, wind lashing against the house. Zoe's ears pricked, a low growl vibrating in her throat as her amber eyes scanned the shadows. The unease in the air thickened, as if unseen eyes lurked somewhere in the rain. Lucas quickly folded the paper, pushing it deep into his pocket, and whispered, "We need to be more careful." 3 small figures dashed through the downpour, blending into the dim, rainy streets of Ravenbrook. Far off, the church bell tolled long, resonant tones, echoing across the night, a warning in its own right. Ravenbrook night sank into the cold rain. The last drops fell steadily from the eaves of the old wooden houses, dripping with a haunting rhythm like a clock. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, Lucas sat curled on his bed, eyes half closed, yet sleep eluded him. The burned fragment in his pocket burned in his mind. The words, "Trust no one. They are watching," repeated endlessly in his thoughts. Mira slept in the corner, breathing heavily, her small hands gripping a silver necklace like a talisman for comfort. Zoe, however, remained awake. The German shepherd lay by the window, ears upright, amber eyes gleaming in the darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every gust of wind through the cracks set Zoe's low growl humming in her throat. Then suddenly, Zoe sprang up. Her body stiffened, hackles raised. A single bark split the stillness of the night, echoing through the little house. Lucas jolted awake, heart hammering. He had never heard Zoe bark like this. It was not a normal warning, but a full-blown alert. "What is it, Zoe?" Lucas whispered, eyes fixed on the window. Moonlight, pale and scattered through the rain-streaked glass, briefly revealed a shadow moving. A tall figure moving slowly, deliberately, exposing just enough of itself before melting into the darkness outside. Lucas's throat tightened. He pulled Mira close, waking her. She blinked, dazed, but when she saw Zoe growling at the window, terror flared across her face. She trembled, clutching Lucas's hand, lips quivering. They've come." Zoe barked repeatedly, the sound cutting through the stormy night. Lucas pressed Mira close, eyes never leaving the glass. The darkness outside thickened, each gust of wind rattling the window like cautious footsteps circling the house. He tried to steady himself, telling himself it could be a trick of his mind from the fire trauma. But Zoe was different. The dog's growl was low and steady, body poised to strike. Proof that danger lurked just beyond. A faint sound echoed. A step, this time not the wind. Footfalls pressed against wet ground, quick then stopping just outside the porch. Lucas shivered. Mira's body shook, eyes wide with tension. Zoe lunged to the window, front paws on the sill, barking fiercely. Her growl vibrated through the walls, but outside remained silent. Summoning his courage, Lucas stepped closer to Zoe. He lifted the curtain slightly, heart skipping. The front yard was shrouded in the murky rain, but beneath the old maple tree, a small glint flashed like reflected metal. Then the shadow vanished, leaving only a cold emptiness. Lucas recoiled, breathing hard. Someone had been there watching them. "Lucas," Mira whispered, voice trembling. "Don't open the door. They'll come in." Lucas placed a firm hand on her shoulder and nodded. "I won't open it. We stay in here. We have Zoe." Zoe remained at the window, eyes never leaving the yard, her stance solid and commanding a living wall. In that moment, Lucas realized Zoe was the only thing standing between them and the terrifying intrusion outside. The three of them huddled in the small room, listening to every sound of the rain. Every strong gust made the window rattle, tightening Lucas's chest with fear. Time dragged, each minute stretching into an hour. Eventually, the sounds outside thinned, leaving only the persistent drizzle. Zoe barked once more, then gradually lowered her growl, though her amber eyes remained vigilant. Lucas pulled Mira closer, a new worry creeping in. If whoever was out there knew exactly where they were, Ravenbrook's peace was truly gone. Outside, the darkness still held hidden eyes, silently watching, waiting for the perfect moment to move closer. The next morning, Ravenbrook was shrouded in thick mist, the cobblestone streets disappearing beneath a white haze. Lucas stepped out of the house and immediately felt the cold seep into his bones. The shadowy figure from the yard still haunted him. Yet beneath the fear burned a determination he had to uncover the truth. He lied to his parents, saying he was heading to the library to study, and quietly led Zoe along. Mira stayed behind, too terrified to step outside. Zoe seemed to understand the mission, walking close to Lucas, her stance alert like a loyal guardian. The Ravenbrook Library sat in an old brick building on the town square. Inside, it was silent, with only the faint rustle of pages and the musty smell of aged paper. Lucas slipped into the archives, a rarely visited section where wooden shelves were stacked high with dusty files. He nervously opened each yellowed folder, his weary eyes scanning the ink-stained lines. Then a name made him shiver. Missing, 1985. He dragged a thick file onto the table, flipping it open hurriedly. The first page held a blurry photo of a boy, about his age. A brief note vanished near the forest's edge, no trace found. Lucas swallowed hard, his heart pounding as he continued flipping through another adult, a woman, then a small family. All disappeared in different years. Even more chilling, the locations in the files were familiar. Northern Trail Junction beside Hollow Creek, the field near the sawmill. His heart froze. These were the same red dots he had seen on the burned warehouse map. Lucas hurriedly pulled the scorched fragment from his jacket, spreading it on the table. Symbols of circles connected by slashes. When he tried to match them with the map in the files, something strange happened. The markings aligned perfectly. Every line matched the locations of the disappearances. It was as if someone had been tracking these vanishings for decades and carefully marking them down. Zoe lay at his feet, her amber eyes following the symbols as if deciphering them alongside Lucas. He whispered, "Zoe, none of this is random." He flipped through more pages, and in the corner of an old file, a small leather-bound journal fell out. The cover was worn, the first letters faded. RJ. Lucas hesitated before opening it. The scrawled handwriting chronicled the disappearances, but some lines made cold sweat bead on his forehead. They came in the night. We thought there was only one, but there were more. They marked the weakest children. The police did not intervene, or perhaps they had been bought. Lucas gripped the journal. Each word pounded into his mind, matching Mira's fear of the authorities. He read on, shivering. "If anyone finds this journal, look at the symbols. It is a warning. We can trust no one but ourselves." Indeed, the symbols on the burnt fragment were repeated throughout the journal. There was no doubt the journal and the scrap of paper shared the same origin. Lucas drew a deep breath, though his chest felt heavy. From the scattered files, the burned map Mira's fear. A horrifying picture slowly emerged. Ravenbrook was far from peaceful. Darkness had long cloaked the town, and someone continued their sinister work in silence. A faint noise made Lucas jump. Someone had entered the archive. He quickly stuffed the files and journal under his arm, slipping the paper into his pocket. Zoe leapt up, ears pricked, eyes gleaming with alertness. A shadow flickered at the end of a shelf, then the footsteps receded. Lucas held his breath, waiting for silence before stepping out. He clutched the files tightly, a mix of fear and determination coursing through him. The evidence in his hands was the key to understanding. But it also meant he now possessed what they wanted to hide at all costs. Zoe stayed close, occasionally glancing back. Lucas realized that from now on, every step they took could be watched. Yet if he didn't continue, Mira would remain trapped in fear, and Ravenbrook would stay swallowed by darkness. That afternoon, the Ravenbrook sky hung heavy with clouds, wind sweeping through the trees, carrying a chill. Lucas held Mira's hand tightly as the three of them left the familiar cobblestone path, veering onto an overgrown trail. Zoe led the way, tense ears high, each firm step leaving a mark on the damp ground. Their destination was the abandoned cemetery at the edge of town, one of the prominent red points on the warehouse map. Long forgotten, rarely visited local children whispered of hauntings. But Lucas knew the truth was far more sinister. The deeper they went, the more desolate the space became. Old gravestones leaned precariously, moss spreading in irregular patches, some nearly broken. Tall weeds hid the paths, the wind whistling through the stones, producing eerie sounds. Mira trembled, clutching Lucas's hand, eyes darting as if something might leap from the shadows. Suddenly, Zoe froze. The dog growled, low nose sniffing the ground ahead. Lucas stepped closer, and his heart seized beneath a layer of dry leaves lay a metal trap, jagged steel teeth gaping. Without Zoe's vigilance, they might have stepped right onto it. "Oh God," Lucas recoiled, holding Mira close. "Who would put this here?" Zoe continued to guide them, weaving around thick underbrush. Moments later, she found 2 more rusted traps hidden in the tall grass. The glinting metal jaws, under the dim light, made the air suffocating. Lucas realized someone had deliberately turned this cemetery into a death maze. As he considered turning back, a flash of light made him freeze. A small camera was mounted in the hollow of an old tree, its dark lens aimed directly at the path. Lucas stiffened. The camera was active, a faint red light blinking. Someone was watching. Mira shivered, pressing against Zoe for protection. Lucas felt her rapid breath, wide eyes staring at the camera as if it had awakened some traumatic memory. "They are watching us," Mira whispered hoarsely. Lucas's throat went dry. He quickly scanned the area, not just one. Glints of metal caught the light on other tree trunks. 3, maybe 4 cameras encircling the cemetery. Anyone entering here was under strict surveillance. Zoe growled, eyes blazing. She positioned herself in front of Lucas, and Mira body taut, like a bowstring ready to spring at any threat. Lucas placed a hand on her back, feeling the rapid heartbeat, the raw strength coiled in her muscles. He stepped back slowly, keeping his voice calm. "We have to leave. Right now." But as he turned, he glimpsed at the far end of the cemetery beyond the crumbling gravestones, a shadow vanish. Just a fleeting moment yet, enough to send a chill through his veins. Clearly, they weren't only being watched by cameras. Someone was present in the darkness. Mira clutched Lucas's hand tightly, trembling. Zoe growled, lunging a few steps toward the open space, but the figure had vanished completely. The air thickened, leaving only the sound of the wind whistling through the gravestones. Lucas drew a deep breath and pulled Mira along Zoe close behind. Rusted traps scattered across the ground forced them to tread carefully, but the fear of unseen eyes watching made every second stretch unbearably long. Finally, the 3 of them emerged from the cemetery, gasping for breath beneath the trees. Lucas glanced back through the dense fog. Cameras glimmered their red lights, blinking like soulless eyes. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the person behind it all knew they existed. From now on, every step Lucas, Mira, and Zoe took would be under surveillance. The next morning, Ravenbrook was again shrouded in thick fog. Lucas sat at his desk, papers strewn before him, patched together files from the library and an old diary. He flipped through the charred pages, comparing them with the fragments of maps lingering in his memory. Slowly, the red marks aligned with locations around town. The forest, the stream, the cemetery, and a red dot right at the center of Ravenbrook. It was the old house near the square, abandoned for decades. Adults claimed it was merely a dilapidated building once owned by a family long gone. But in the diary beside the red mark, a scrawled line read, "Basement, the starting point." Lucas shivered. If the cemetery was already riddled with iron traps and cameras, the old house could very well be the center of everything. As he murmured this to Zoe, Mira suddenly entered. The moment she saw the drawing of the old house, she reacted violently. Her face went pale, eyes wide, shaking her head repeatedly, clutching Lucas's arm as if pleading, Don't go there." Lucas froze. It was the first time Mira had spoken clearly in days. Her voice trembled, choked by fear buried deep inside. Zoe jumped to her feet, growling low. The fur along her spine bristled, amber eyes blazing toward the picture of the house. It was as if the dog too sensed the lurking danger. "Mira," Lucas whispered. "You've been there before." Mira didn't answer, huddling down, arms wrapped around Zoe, trembling. Zoe licked her hand gently, trying to reassure her. Lucas fell silent. Even without words, Mira's reaction confirmed that the old house wasn't just a red dot. It was tied to her most terrifying memories. Lucas recalled the diary's note starting point. If that meant a door leading to a basement, perhaps all the secrets, the disappearances, the stranger in the woods, originated there. But entering it meant facing Mira's deepest fears. At noon, Lucas decided to scout the square. The old house stood silently, its brick walls mottled wooden doors, rotting windows boarded up. Amid the peaceful town, it loomed like a shadow of unease. In the dim light, Lucas noticed faint carvings on the doorframe, strange symbols identical to those in the diary. Zoe growled softly, stepping close, nose sniffing the air, body tense. Lucas felt his heartbeat spike. Inside that old house, something still lingered. He returned home, but the symbols haunted him. To protect Mira, he had to uncover the truth. When he finally shared his plan, Mira broke into tears, clutching his sleeve. Through her sobs, she whispered, "It's so dark there." There were screams and iron doors. Lucas froze. Mira had remembered a fragment of the basement, the old house's hidden horrors. Zoe stepped forward, resting her head on Lucas's knee, eyes blazing. It was as if she were saying, "We have to go, no matter the danger." Lucas clenched his fists. The puzzle was clear. The basement under the old house held everything. But entering meant dragging Mira back into her nightmare. He had only one choice: prepare meticulously, then with Zoe step into the darkness to find the light for Mira. That night, Ravenbrook's sky was thick black as a heavy curtain over the town. Rain fell in a fine drizzle, and the wind whistled through the trees, heightening the eerie atmosphere. Lucas held Mira's small hand tightly running, while glancing behind. Flashing lights from a torch swept across the trees and underbrush. The stranger was close. "Hurry, Mira!" Lucas panted, pulling her across the slick trail. Mira stumbled, trembling, but rose again with each thudding step behind her. Zoe raced ahead, fur bristled, growling fiercely. Each bark pierced the night like a warning and a push forward. The path led them to an old wooden bridge spanning a deep ravine. Below, cold mist rose from the stream. The bridge, long neglected, creaked with every step, threatening to collapse. Lucas hesitated. Behind them, the torchlight grew closer. The smell of cigarette smoke carried by the wind. No choice remained. He gripped Mira's hand tighter and shouted, "Let's go!" They dashed across the rotting boards, groaning beneath them. Zoe stayed behind, turning and growling at the towering figure chasing them. The man wore a dark coat, tall, with a stun baton in hand. The torchlight reflected off his eyes, twisting his face into a demonic mask. "You won't get away," he hissed through clenched teeth, echoing across the night. Lucas's heart pounded. He pulled Mira faster, ignoring the bridge's protest beneath their feet. Near the opposite bank, Zoe suddenly spun, leaping at the man. The sudden collision threw him off balance. Zoe bit the sleeve, pulling with all her strength. He roared, swinging the baton. Sparks flew as it hit a wooden plank, cracking and splintering the bridge. "Zoe!" Lucas shouted, half turning, but Mira tugged him onward, eyes wide with terror. Zoe's jaws locked, muscles straining. The man staggered backward, stepping onto a rotten plank. A sharp snap sounded. The bridge gave way, plunging him into the darkness of the ravine below. Lucas and Mira froze, hearts racing. Zoe stood firm, fur singed slightly by the sparks, eyes bright, breathing heavily. She had survived, protecting them to the end. Lucas embraced Mira, voice trembling. She saved us." Mira sobbed, wrapping herself around Zoe. The dog licked her tear-streaked cheek as if to say, "Don't be afraid. I'm still here." The three of them stood for a long moment listening to the wind howling through the mountain gorge. The man's figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness that stretched below. Yet Lucas knew his fate was far from certain. The ravine was deep enough to end anyone's life, but instinct told him the threat was not yet over. Moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the broken bridge, casting shadows on the swaying planks. Lucas squeezed Mira's hand, glanced at Zoe, and silently, the three of them left the place, an unease heavier than ever, pressing in their chests. The next morning, Ravenbrook remained shrouded in gray clouds, the wind whistling through the old wooden houses. Lucas carried a heavy resolve. After the horrifying night by the wooden bridge, he understood that the truth hidden within would not release them if they kept running. To protect Mira and the town, he had to confront the secrets lurking in the old house. Zoe walked close, her posture resolute, ears alert as if reading her master's mind. Mira remained silent, her face pale from the previous night's terror, but her eyes flickered with a strange determination, like she sensed what awaited them in the darkness. That afternoon, the three approached the old house in silence. The rotting wooden door stood still, the boards over the windows creaking in the wind. Lucas inhaled deeply and pried it open with a crowbar. The door burst ajar, sending a cloud of dust, the damp, musty smell hitting their noses. Inside, weak light from the cracks in the door fell onto the floor, highlighting an old rug in the center of the living room. Zoe hissed softly, sniffing, then moved toward the rug, clawing at it insistently. Lucas quickly pulled it back. Beneath was a rusted iron hatch, its handle corroded. His heart pounded. This was the entrance to the cellar. He looked at Mira, who stepped back trembling, whispering, "To there." Lucas placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking softly. "Zoe's here, and I'm here. We're just going to take a look, then we'll come back up." Zoe growled softly, a promise in her voice. Lucas drew a deep breath and lifted the iron cover. The rusty hinges screeched as it opened, revealing steps descending into dense darkness. A cold draft rose, carrying the scent of damp earth and rusted metal. He switched on his flashlight, the yellow beam illuminating each creaking wooden step. Zoe led the way as Lucas guided Mira down. Every step felt unbearably heavy, the silence so intense that even their breathing seemed deafening. Finally, they reached the damp ground. Before them lay a wide cellar, jagged stone walls, low ceiling, and rows of rusted metal shelves stacked with papers, files, and small wooden boxes. Lucas approached trembling as he opened a box. Inside were stacks of old documents, school ID cards, birth certificates, and photographs of children. Each small face stared back from the faded black and white pictures, their eyes empty as though forgotten somewhere in the shadows. "Oh my God," Lucas whispered, hands shaking. These are the missing children?" Mira stood behind him, eyes widening as she saw the photos. She stepped forward, hands trembling, picking up a yellowed photo at the corner. The flashlight revealed the face, a little girl with wide eyes and a faint smile. Mira froze, her hand shaking violently. Then she whispered hoarsely, as if a long-buried memory had surfaced. "It's me." Lucas was stunned. He examined the photo, then looked at Mira. This was her face, though younger, unmistakable. "Mira, you were one of the children who were taken." His voice choked with emotion. Mira suddenly broke down, her small shoulders shaking violently. She dropped the photo and collapsed onto the cold ground, murmuring, "I remember. The darkness, the iron door, the cries." Zoe immediately pressed close, shielding her, licking her cheek. Lucas knelt, holding Mira tightly, his heart gripped by pain and rage. He understood that what Mira had endured was more horrific than words could describe, and the evidence before them proved that the mastermind behind the disappearances had never stopped. Lucas clenched his fists, eyes blazing in the flashlight beam. We won't let this continue. In the cellar's darkness, the wind whistled through the cracks, carrying an ominous echo. Zoe lifted her head, amber eyes glowing, standing firm as a sentinel. At the very edge of the shadows, amid sorrow and exposed secrets, a silent vow was born. They would uncover the truth together. The cold cellar seemed to hold its breath. Lucas pressed Mira to his chest, the dim light flickering across damp walls, revealing the forgotten documents and photographs. Zoe stood guard, for bristling amber eyes blazing like twin flames in the darkness. Suddenly a rustling came from the hatch. A shadow appeared. The same man from the chase at the wooden bridge had returned. In his hands an old flashlight and a long stick. He stepped forward slowly, eyes fixed on Mira like prey he had hunted for long. "Give me the girl." His hoarse voice rang through the cellar, cold and commanding. "I'm not joking." Lucas froze, heart pounding as if it would leap out of his chest. Mira trembled, clinging to Zoe. The dog growled, tense like a bowstring, eyes warning the intruder. "No," Lucas shouted, voice trembling but resolute. "She's safe and we won't let you touch her." The man smirked, the flashlight beam sweeping across the room. A rustle and he lunged. Lucas hurriedly pushed Mira behind him, but Zoe leapt in front, blocking the attack. A violent clash erupted. Zoe was grazed by the man's stick, a spark flashing as it struck, making the dog yelp in pain. Lucas felt Zoe shiver under the strike, yet her gaze remained steadfast, defending her master and Mira. His chest tightened as he realized she bore the pain for them. The man struck again at Lucas. He ducked, pent-up fear and fury swirling inside him. In that moment, a surge of courage ignited. Lucas pushed forward, forcing the man back, while Zoe surged with him, creating space. Mira stayed under the table, tears streaming as Lucas grabbed her hand. "Quick, follow me outside." Zoe surged ahead, growling, attacking the man, again making him stagger. The flashlight dropped sparks, igniting dry dust. The suffocating air now carried the acrid smell of smoke and fire. Lucas pulled Mira, running after Zoe, their footsteps pounding the uneven floor. The heat and smoke made it hard to breathe, but he knew that if they stopped, the man would catch Mira. A rotten floorboard creaked underfoot, and flames spread quickly across the burning debris. Zoe suddenly dropped to her knees, using her body to shield Mira as the man tried to approach. A short lunge struck Zoe, wounding her shoulder and singeing her fur. Lucas cried out, his heart aching, as he watched the dog endure pain in their place. With no other option, Lucas summoned every ounce of strength, lunged forward, grabbed Mira, and pulled her behind Zoe. The dog growled fiercely, using all her strength to hold the man back, giving Lucas the chance to get Mira safely onto solid ground. The fire roared higher, red light reflecting off the walls, illuminating Lucas's sweat-drenched face, eyes bloodshot but determined. He pulled Mira out of danger, stopping on the hard ground, heart pounding, glancing back. The man stood amid the sea of flames, taking a deep breath, his eyes glinting with menace. But Zoe charged again, barking loudly, forcing him to retreat. In an instant, he vanished into the darkness of the smoke-filled basement, leaving only the smell of burnt wood and the creaking of collapsing boards in silence. Lucas drew a deep breath, holding Mira close. She trembled, but her eyes shone with a newfound glimmer of trust. Zoe stood beside them, exhausted yet vigilant, ears perked and hackles raised as if to say, "We are alive, and we will fight on." Light from their flashlights cut through the smoke, reflecting off Lucas's face. He realized the truth just revealed. This man was not acting alone. He was a critical link in the dark conspiracy enveloping Ravenbrook. Watching Mira hug Zoe, Lucas silently vowed they had made progress, but the journey was far from over. The horrors ahead were still waiting, and they would have to face them. Smoke from the basement twisted into the sky, winding around the trees and old rooftops of Ravenbrook, painting the night in fiery reds. The scent of burning and dust clung to their clothes, the heat making Lucas and Mira cough violently. Zoe stood guard, hackles raised, ears alert, amber eyes scanning for any movement near the smoky ruins. Step by trembling step, Lucas guided Mira away from the forest. He tried to calm her, holding her close to his chest. "Don't be afraid. It's over now." Mira's shivered eyes still flickering with fear, but slightly steadier. Zoe's low growl reminded them to keep moving. Lucas knew they needed to leave the area before it became too late. Then from afar, flashing red and blue lights appeared. Sirens blared, echoing through the forest and the small town. The police had arrived. They quickly approached the raging basement, carrying fire extinguishers and powerful flashlights. Lucas raised his hand, waving. "We're here. Help us." A few officers rushed in their lights, cutting through the smoke and flames, reflecting off their faces. Lucas felt the first real sense of safety in hours. Mira clung to him, tearful eyes, no longer consumed by terror. Zoe blocked the path, growling, preventing the man from escaping their gaze. And then through the fire and red light, the stranger emerged, trembling, surrounded by officers. His coat was smeared with ash and soot, his face distorted in the flickering light. He shouted, trying to resist, but it was too late. "No, An officer swiftly grabbed his wrist and cuffed him. He struggled, but the police outnumbered him. Zoe let out one final growl, amber eyes blazing, confirming her mission was complete. Lucas exhaled in relief. He looked at Mira and saw her smile faintly, hands relaxing slightly, though still clutching Zoe. Her voice, hesitant but real, whispered the first words in days of silence. Thank you." Lucas choked back tears, holding Mira tighter. Those small words shone like a light piercing the dark night. He knew she truly felt safe. Police scoured the basement, finding documents, photographs of missing children, and other materials. Their investigation revealed that the man they captured was a key link in a long-running abduction network. The red marks on maps, the journal codes, and the partially burned note Lucas discovered all connected directly to him. Lucas watched Mira closely, realizing the painful truth: she was not the only victim, but a vital piece in exposing the criminal web. Yet now, she was physically safe. An officer approached, asking Lucas a few questions. He responded, trembling but clear. Mira stood beside Zoe, eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity, as officers worked recording evidence and taking notes. A small sense of peace crept into Lucas's chest. For the first time in days, he truly felt safe. The fire gradually came under control. Wooden walls collapsed, ash drifting through the air, but Zoe remained in front of Mira, protective, as if danger could return at any moment. Lucas looked at the dog, gratitude swelling in his heart. Without Zoe, they might not have escaped the basement, and Mira could have remained trapped in fear forever. Mira smiled faintly, speaking full words for the first time. "Why, you are safe." Lucas smiled back, voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Mira, you're safe now." Police immediately escorted Mira to safety, ready to provide medical and psychological care. Lucas and Zoe stayed behind, hearts both relieved and heavy from all they had endured. But at least Ravenbrook was safe from that man's grasp, and a part of darkness had been lifted. Watching Mira speak for the first time, Lucas knew every effort, every risk. From tracing clues through the forest, crossing the abandoned graveyard, to facing the blazing basement, had been worth it. Ravenbrook's light had finally pierced through the dense darkness, bringing hope to children who had been taken. The sky over Ravenbrook glowed in warm orange gold as sunset fell. The last rays filtered through the trees, illuminating the green grass stretching toward the forest edge. The scent of damp earth and fresh rain created a scene both peaceful and vivid. Lucas sat on the grass, holding Mira close, eyes fixed on the horizon, trying to imprint every detail of this calm after the storm. Mira sat beside him, small hands clutching Zoe's leash. The German shepherd lay quietly by their side, amber fur gleaming in the sunset, steady, warm breaths filling the air with an indescribable sense of safety. Zoe's eyes still shone brightly, as if to say that no matter how dark the night, courage and loyalty would always light the way. Lucas looked at Mira, a gentle smile spreading across his tired yet relieved face. He couldn't forget the moments they had just endured, from the underground hideout through the abandoned graveyard, across the precarious wooden bridge to the chase through the night forest and the raging fire. Every trial had tested their courage to the limit, and now they had escaped safe in the peaceful light of the day's end. Mira glanced at Zoe, her eyes shining with a newfound trust. She gently stroked the German shepherd's head and whispered softly, You saved me." Lucas smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Mira's shoulder. "Yes, Mira, Zoe and I will always be by your side." The meadow around them was so quiet that even the rustling of leaves and Zoe's steady breathing could be heard. A soft breeze carried the scent of wet grass and the dampness of the forest, creating a sense of calm, yet lingering tension. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the peace, the safety they had fought so hard to reclaim. Zoe rested, her warm breath radiating against Mira. Occasionally she shivered lightly, but never left the girl's side. The dog remained a silent guardian, ready to leap into danger at a moment's notice. Lucas felt overwhelming gratitude, not just because Zoe had saved them, but because through her Mira could finally cry freely and breathe evenly, knowing she was no longer alone. Mira loosened her grip but still held Zoe's leash. Looking up at Lucas with trusting eyes and a small smile, she said, We'll be okay." Lucas nodded, his heart swelling with hope. He knew that while the horrors they had faced would never be forgotten, it was their courage, perseverance, and loyalty that had allowed them to survive. He looked at Zoe, then Mira, realizing the profound message before him. Even in the darkest night, courage and steadfast friendship can illuminate the world. The three of them sat quietly, listening to the natural sounds around them. The evening birds, the rustling grass, the wind sweeping through the trees. Everything blended together, creating a moment of serenity they had never experienced before. Lucas inhaled deeply, letting his breath settle, and for the first time in days, the heaviness in his chest seemed to lift. Mira smiled softly, finally speaking in full sentences for the first time. "Thank you. You and Zoe." Lucas hugged her tighter, silent, smiling, letting the sunset bathe their faces in golden light. Zoe laid her head on the grass, occasionally glancing toward the forest, as if still on alert, but this time with less tension in her amber eyes. The Ravenbrook sunset glowed warmly. The red-orange sky reflected on the old rooftops and the dew-kissed grass. Light spilled across every stair, every shattered pane of glass, every exhausted yet hopeful face. Lucas realized that it was this very moment amidst nature and the fading sunlight that truly conveyed the lesson they had learned. Loyalty and courage can illuminate even the darkest shadows. Zoe lay calmly, her steady breath emanating warmth. Mira held the leash tightly, her gaze shining with a newfound trust. That even after all the terror and darkness, they still had each other. Lucas gently stroked Zoe's head softly, saying, "We did it. Thanks to you." The dog glanced up, eyes blazing, as if replying with unconditional loyalty and love. Mira hugged Zoe's neck, resting her head against the dog's back, feeling safe for the first time. The Ravenbrook sunset slowly faded, but in the hearts of the three its light still burned bright. The town might fall back into darkness, but for Lucas, Mira, and Zoe, they knew that friendship, courage, and loyalty would always lead the way, illuminating the darkest days. The story of Lucas, Mira, and Zoe drew to a close, yet the lessons it left behind resonated. In the shadows of Ravenbrook, it was Zoe's loyalty and bravery, the intelligent, strong, yet gentle German shepherd, that lit a path. Zoe was not just a silent guardian, but a bridge that helped Mira regain her trust, reminded Lucas of his inner strength, and demonstrated that the bond between humans and animals can overcome any peril. Through each chapter, from the rusted car in the forest, the abandoned graveyard, to the underground hideout, Zoe stood as a symbol of unwavering loyalty. When the children were scared and powerless, the dog stepped forward facing danger to protect them without complaint or calculation. That image reminds us that a dog's love and devotion, especially a German shepherd, protects not only the body but also heals the soul and nurtures hope. The story underscores that courage is not merely facing danger, but patience, companionship, and belief in the ones we love. Lucas and Mira were fortunate to have Zoe by their side. Yet the larger message is that anyone can find light through loyalty and love surrounding them. Ravenbrook may have ended under the sunset, but the courage, resilience, and love of young hearts and a faithful dog remained bright. It is a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness, friendship, loyalty, and bravery will always be the guiding light, kindling hope for those who dare to love and protect the fragile lives around them.